All right, topic 5-1 to 5-3. Let's talk about World War One a little bit here and how we get into it and what it's all about. There are four main causes of World War One. They're militarism, alliances, aka the alliance system, imperialism, and nationalism. We'll talk about those here in just a second. Militarism. It's this whole concept that you're going to glorify military. You're going to be try and build up your military. That way, it's going to be super strong. If you want to, expand your country, if you need defense, if you want to basically sit there and say, "Hey, other countries, I think we should do this," and if they say no, you can kind of be like, "Look at my military," that sort of thing. That's kind of going to be what militarism is. What it's going to actually do, in a sense, is for a lot of these countries in the early 1900s, they're going to actually increase the size of their military, the amount of military weapons, etc. You can see in the bottom right corner there all those different sorts of technology that it's going to basically allow countries to fight and kill a lot more people much more efficiently. So warfare is going to become much, much nastier. And with this whole concept of militarism here, it's going to be a pretty nasty deal in World War One when we get there. Here's the military strength. You guys can check that out and just kind of see and compare on your own. The alliance system. You've got the Triple Alliance, aka the Central Powers: Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. You've got the Triple Entente, which is going to be Britain, Russia, and France. Not quite popping up there on the screen, but you can see it on the map there on the right in that kind of dark grayish color. These countries are basically going to sit there and agree to have each other's backs. If one gets attacked, then their buddies are going to jump in. So if Britain were to attack Germany, then Germany's allies, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, are going to jump in and help them out. Same thing goes with any other country. So it's going to be an entangling alliance. It's going to force other countries. Maybe they're not involved in the original conflict, but because they've agreed to these alliances, they're going to have to get involved. Imperialism. You can see on the map right there. We talked about all the different countries there, and we talk about how imperialism is bigger countries, more powerful countries, taking over smaller countries for various reasons. This is going to cause a lot of issues, tension, competition. So how does this actually lead to World War One being a true world war? If you look in the countries over here in the map here, you've got, say, France is kind of that goldish yellow color there. You can see in Africa there's some golden yellow areas, and there's some over there in Asia. The kind of light green, Great Britain, they've got areas elsewhere. So when Britain gets pulled into war, for instance, all the territories it owns under imperialism are going to get pulled in as well, and same thing with all those other imperialist countries. So you're going to have literally a world war in this sense, because the mother country, the imperialist country, is going to get pulled in, and then the imperialized countries are going to get pulled in. We kind of talk like it was a parent-child relationship a little bit. When the parent goes somewhere, so does the child. In this case, when the parent country, like Great Britain, goes to a war, all the other countries that imperialize go to war as well, creating a world war. Nationalism. This is going to create a bunch of tension here. Basically, it's a super devoted pride to your country, and these nations are going to form. You're going to have issues when the forming is, hey, I'm Serbia, I'm so awesome. Oh, I'm Austria-Hungary, I'm so awesome. I'm Germany, I'm super cool. And they're going to have all these things in common, like history, culture, language, etc. So when you create these nations, people want to show off how awesome they are and so forth, which is going to lead to a bunch of problems here, because eventually at some point when you say, I'm the best, you have to kind of prove it. And that can cause conflicts. The Balkans, the picture on the map there, that is the Balkan Peninsula there. So that's referring to those countries in the Balkans. Bunch of different ethnic groups and different types of peoples. That's going to cause problems. Differences tend to cause problems. Austria-Hungary takes over Bosnia-Herzegovina. That's going to anger Serbia, because Bosnia and Herzegovina are Slavic people. It's the same ethnicity, just like the Serbs. So Austria-Hungary is a different ethnicity, and that's going to upset the Serbs in Serbia there. So there's going to be some minor wars that break out, some conflicts for a year or two, but it's not going to be enough to really kick off a war. But what it does is it creates a lot of tension. 1914 rolls around. Austria-Hungary is convinced that Serbia is going to cause problems for them, and it's going to happen. This guy, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he's going to be assassinated, which we'll talk about here in just a second. So Franz Ferdinand, heir to Austria-Hungary, he and his wife, Sophie, they're visiting the capital city of Bosnia in Sarajevo. So in a sense, what's going to happen is you're going to see the Serbians people, for instance, they're going to view Franz Ferdinand as kind of a dictator. He came in and did all this terrible stuff, took over a country that shouldn't be theirs. So a guy by the name of Gavrilo Princip, part of an organization called the Black Hand, they're a Bosnian Serb nationalist group thinking that Bosnia-Herzegovina should be its own country or maybe come to Serbia. They're going to go and have Princip, he's going to assassinate the Archduke and his wife. They're going to be killed. Who in the world is Austria-Hungary going to blame? Why? It's going to be Serbia, because Gavrilo Princip is from Serbia, and he is a Bosnian nationalist here that's going to support them becoming their own country. So he's going to blame Serbia, and that's going to cause a lot of tension. And, well, what's the next step once you blame someone and they say, no, I didn't do it? You might have to kind of prove that they did. In this case, it's going to lead to war. Hero or terrorist here for Princip. We talked about that in class. It's going to be just a matter of perspective, really, depending on where you're at, what side of the fence you're on, where you're from, what your beliefs are. So what happens here? What does the alliance system do? Austria-Hungary is going to blame Serbia, and they're going to declare war on Serbia. Russia, because they're friends with Serbia and have an alliance with them, they're going to declare war on Austria-Hungary. Notice, Russia was not originally involved. So they're like, hey, we're getting ready. Germany is going to actually declare war on Russia because the alliance system with Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary and Germany are buddies because the alliance system, they've got to fight Russia. Because France is friendly with Russia, when Germany declares war on them, France has to declare war on Germany. Notice all these countries, they're kind of get involved, and they were never originally involved. Germany says, hey, I'm going to go fight Belgium because I want to go to France, and it's the quickest way, easiest way for me to get there. Belgium is neutral. However, they have an alliance with Britain. So when Germany declares war on Belgium, Britain declares war on Germany because they've now declared war on Belgium and their buddy France. All this nasty alliance system here, it's going to be a chain reaction. When somebody declares war, their buddy's going to jump in, and then somebody else is going to jump in. It's just going to be a nasty mess. 1914, World War I begins, excuse me. You can see here, these are going to be the major powers. Italy is going to change sides over time. So they are one of the big three, but they are going to change sides. Trench warfare becomes a defensive war on the Western Front there in the area of France. Germans get stopped, and then it turns into this big nasty war with all these terrible means of killing people like machine guns, tanks, flamethrowers, etc. They're going to sit there and start digging trenches. You've got no man's land there between the two opposing sides of trenches. You don't want to be out there. It's not safe. It's no man's land because if you go out there, you are liable to be killed. How trench warfare is going to work is you're going to bunker down in those trenches there, and then one side's going to jump out, run across no man's land and attack, and then eventually there will be a counterattack, and they just kind of go back and forth, back and forth. Going to be a lot of deaths because of this. Not a lot of ground gained or lost. It's just a lot of people dying for very little territory or wins. You also got artillery in the back as well. It's going to fire, and so that's why you see the pockmarks there in the ground in no man's land a little bit. Trenches is going to be nasty, the actual life of it. There's going to be a lot of disease and a lot of issues. Trench fever, you're going to have lice, so there's going to be pests and rodents. Things like trench foot because you can't dry your feet. If it rains, there's not really a good drainage system for the most part, so you're going to be wet pretty frequently, which can lead to a lot of nasty complications like losing a foot even, or at the least some very nasty disease. The water's going to be nasty. It's not getting drained. When things get into that water, you can use your imaginations there. Rats are going to be a problem as well. The smell, bodies, dead bodies. People aren't going to be able to shower. Sandbags, cigarette smoke, etc. And then dead bodies are going to stack up, so you can't really dispose of them very well. A lot of nastiness going on in the trenches. All the different technologies here. We'll talk about gas warfare real quick. Most countries use poison gas. It's going to be pretty nasty. Sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can smell it, sometimes you can't. But you want to get your gas mask on as quick as possible if you suspect something. Otherwise, you may end up dead. This quote here we talked about, some people didn't believe something was happening. They couldn't smell it or see it, so they're like, nothing's going on. Next thing you know, they're dead. This is up on Canvas. Don't forget to do this if you haven't already. United States is wanting to stay neutral. For example, isolationists, stay out of the war, don't send in American troops. It's costly in terms of lives. It's costly in terms of money. Uncle Sam, a.k.a. the government, President Wilson, wants to keep everybody neutral and partial in thought as well as in action because there's a lot of different ethnicities and immigrants, people with ties to Germany, to France, to Britain, to Italy, all those different countries. And if we don't remain neutral, you might have people in the United States fighting over which side we should take. So he wants us to keep neutral and isolationist for that reason, plus the economic, all the people that could die. Whereas the interventionists want us to get in, and hey, it's our war too. This is everybody. Our allies are in it. We need to get, it affects everybody, not just those people over there. We deal with Britain, France, Germany, etc. So we have to get involved because it impacts us. Picture in the top right corner kind of shows that America's isolationist on the left, but on the flip side, they're doing business. So it's a little bit hypocritical of America, saying they're a little bit two-faced. U.S. getting into the war. You can see in the bottom right corner, submarine warfare is going to be a big one. All those red dots, they represent submarines, ships that have been sunk by submarines. The Lusitania right there, we'll talk about that in just a second. Britain blockades German ports. They're trying to get supplies cut off from Germany. In response, Germany does the same thing, except for they say we're going to do unrestricted submarine warfare. Unrestricted meaning all ships are up for grabs. It can be shot out of the water, whether it's military or civilian ships. So that's going to anger people because for the most part in military engagements, most people sit there and say, hey, it should really only be military versus military. Civilians stay out of it. But unrestricted submarine warfare is going to allow anybody to be shot if they're in the water. Of course, they're not going to shoot their own ships. Convoys, kind of a circle of military ships around other ships. We did a little demonstration in class with that. So imagine for a second you are on a passenger ship or a trading ship. You're going to have an escort, if you will, a protection guard of several ships around you. They're going to be able to protect you from the submarines. Allies need, with blockades in place, they're going to need supplies. They're going to need ways around that. Allies are concerned, hey, can we get those supplies? Can we cut off supplies, etc.? The unrestricted submarine warfare is going to lead to a big deal for us getting into the war. Lusitania is a British passenger ship, similar to Titanic in the concept. Germany's going to sink it. 1,200 plus people are going to die. 128 are Americans. This is really going to be the thing that really gets us hot and steamed and gets us really, really close to getting the war. It is the most influential thing probably because it shows us, hey, even though we're not involved in the war directly, we're not safe. Germany is going to be attacking people, and if there are Americans over there, they could be attacked. So we're not safe, and this really steams us off. Meanwhile, back at home, Wilson's trying to get elected here, and he does sweepingly. He really doesn't have a lot of great competition because he says, hey, I will keep America out of the war, and Americans love that. Tells them kind of what they're looking to hear, and people go for it. So he would love us to keep us out of war, but as we'll see here in a little bit, he is kind of preparing for the war just in case. Zimmerman note gets sent from Germany to Mexico. Arthur Zimmerman, foreign minister, sends it to his counterpart in Mexico. Britain intercepts it, they decode it, and Zimmerman admits that it's a real thing. This is going to be the thing that actually sets Wilson off and the government off, and they say, hey, let's go to war. So the tipping point is this. The final straw is this, but the Lusitania being sunk, that is the thing that gets us closest to war. It's the biggest jump. This is just the final straw. What the Zimmerman telegram actually says here is that Germany, hey, we're Germany, we're going to do unrestricted submarine warfare. We know that the United States is probably not going to like it. We're going to try and keep them neutral. But if it's not successful, of Mexico, where we want this alliance with you, you guys, let's go fight. You guys fight fight the United States. Keep them busy so they're out of Europe, because that's going to cause problems for us if they're in Europe. When we win this together, we'll do everything together. When we win, Mexico, says Germany, you guys can have all that land back that you lost, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, from the Mexican-American War. You can have it all back. Get Japan involved here to kind of negotiate between Germany and Mexico, and we'll sort out the details. But that's kind of the goal here, the Zimmerman telegram, and it's going to really upset the Americans. It's probably the second thing gets closest to war, and it actually officially sends us off to war. Wilson's goal, moral diplomacy, that concept of spreading democracy. What's he want to do with World War I? He wants to make the world safe for democracy. So there it is. Boom. Safe for democracy so we can spread it. To actually go to war, you got to have the Selective Service Act. This is going to draft almost 3 million people. The goal is to prep the country for war. We can't just run off to war. We don't have the military, so we got to draft a bunch of people. War Industry Board, super important. It's going to make sure all businesses in America basically are engaged in the war effort. They're not wasting products. They're making products they need to. If they have extra scrap steel, say, they're going to ship it off to someone that's going to make tanks or ships or whatever. Making sure all industries are engaged and efficient in the war effort. Naval Construction Act. This is the moment where we talked about how Wilson wanted to keep us neutral. It's how he gets reelected. But in 1915, he asked Congress for an expansion of the Navy, 500 million battleships, submarines, and other ships. His goal here is to prep for the war. So even though he hadn't been reelected yet, even though we weren't in the war, he was prepping for the war well before we actually got involved. Food Administration, headed by Herbert Hoover, going to be a future president. Basically wants to ration and conserve food, set prices to control how much people can buy and sell. That way there's enough enough food for the troops. Committee on Public Information, you've got to kind of sell the war to people. If people believe in something, they're much likely to do it, try and be successful, etc. So all sorts of propaganda out there. That persuasive literature may or may not be true, but it's going to try and get you to think a certain way. We did an activity in class. There it is. It's probably going to be biased or misleading, even if it's not an outright lie. Trying to get a particular issue promoted. There are going to be some objectors to the war, conscientious objectors. They're going to object to the war on moral or religious grounds. No war for us. It goes against my religion or my beliefs. About 1 out of every 8, 12% people that are drafted don't show up because of this. Women are going to oppose the war as well in general. Women's Peace Party is going to be the head of that. However, some women are going to support the war because they want jobs, and what the effect of jobs is going to be eventually down the road. It limits that prejudice against women being able to do things that men can do. It's going to give them better rights down the road. There are going to be some anti-German sentiments here. No more hamburgers, because there's a city in Germany called Hamburg. Germans are seen as barbarians. Animals there you can see in there. We talked about the Huns a little bit. The Mongols were kind of a barbarian warrior group several hundred years ago, comparing them to them. So that's going to be a bit of an issue as well. Espionage Act here. Treasonable or seditious newspapers, magazines, anything printed is going to be banned. That way, you can't say bad things against the government. This is going to be questionably constitutional. The Sedition Act, it's disloyal. It's a crime to use anything basically talking bad about the government, the military, and limits free speech. This is going to go to the court case. I know it's not popping up on my screen down there for some reason, but down here, this is Schenck v. United States. And it's going to basically say, hey, these are okay. You can, in certain situations, limit free speech. Like, for instance, one of the most common things, yelling fire in a crowded theater, can't do that. But it also allows for the Sedition and Espionage Act to go ahead and be passed and be constitutional. Again, that is Schenck, Schenck v. United States. This is just kind of showing here that the Sedition Acts there, these two that we just talked about, they're going to basically talk about free speech, freedom of the press, etc. Those are going to be eaten up by the sedition bills. Things are going to happen in American society. You're going to have a lot of people join the Red Cross, particularly women as nurses. And after the war, women get the right to vote. They're kind of proving themselves. 19th Amendment right there. Great migration with African Americans. You're going to see a ton of people, primarily from the South, moving to the North, get those high-paying manufacturing jobs. Got to make things for the war, so the African Americans are going to be after those jobs for about 20 years or so. They're also going to fight in the war as well. Steps towards equality here for women and non-whites being taken slowly. Russia is going to get out of the war. Tsar Nicholas, he's not doing a very good job, and he basically gets kicked out. Russia leads the war. Vladimir Lenin, he is the founder of the Soviet Union, as it'll be known for about 70 or 80 years. They signed their own treaty with Germany to stop fighting, and this is where Russia is going to go communist in the Russian Revolution of 1917. So, war ends on the Eastern Front. Russia's out. See you later. Meanwhile, Americans at war, the American Expeditionary Force under John Pershing. He's also the guy that chased around Pancho Villa when he was causing trouble north of Mexico. You're going to have a ton of soldiers from the U.S. coming into the World War. That's going to be awesome for France, Britain, and all their allies there. This is going to be reinforcements. It's going to give them hope. Hey, we got a real shot, and it's going to do the flip side for Germany, Austria-Hungary, etc. Couple million soldiers. They're going to be nicknamed doughboys because of the, they kind of got a white look when they're marching back historically, etc. There's a couple different reasons. Just know that they're called doughboys, though. Germany's going to fight on the Western fronts, and the Americans are going to see a bunch of action on the spring and summer of 1918 as the war kind of wraps up here a little bit. Germany's collapsing. Why? You've got the fresh troops from the U.S., reinforcements for the Allies. Germany's military, they've been fighting. They're just going to get weaker over the years. They can't sustain what they're doing. Shortage through blockades and stuff. They're not going to have enough supplies. The war is going to end. Germans are going to revolt and overthrow the Kaiser. That's their leader. 11th hour, 11th day, 11th month, you have an armistice. So the war is not officially over, but it's a ceasefire. No more shooting, no more fighting. We'll work out the treaty terms in just a little bit. Meanwhile, the Spanish flu, so to speak, in Europe, you're going to have, in 1918, you're going to have 50+ million people die from this. Pretty nasty. You're going to have almost 750,000 Americans die. So really, it's probably about 6 times as many Americans die from this flu than do in the war. Total results, you can see there on the chart there, 18 million dead, 41 million dead or injured or missing between civilians, and this is civilian and military, so this is a very, very costly war. A lot of people die. Wilson, he comes up with this idea of 14 points. He wants peace without victory. In other words, let's not punish Germany. If you punish them, they're going to get angry, and this might cause problems down the road. No, he's right. This is going to be one of the biggest reasons World War II happens, which we'll eventually get into. His major 3 points. Countries in Europe. We're not going to talk about all 14, although there's the thing up on Canvas you guys can check out. All these European nations, they need to figure out who should be a country. You shouldn't have imperialist nations telling different groups of people they should be a country. Figure it out yourselves, and that'll hopefully eliminate problems. Freedom of the seas, free trade, no more weapon stockpiles, no secret treaties. Let's be open with everything that we're going to do. Let's have everybody have a fair say. Let's also have a League of Nations that's going to kind of oversee these principles. If there are problems between nations, the League of Nations is going to solve them. You have the Paris Peace Conference, and the Allies, for the most part, they reject Wilson's 14 points. They want to punish Germany, make them pay for the war, literally pay for the war, reparations, pay money. The biggest problem of the Treaty of Versailles here is what it's going to be called. They're going to be super harsh with Germany and the Central Powers, which is going to create resentment. Hey, we already lost the war. Why are you piling on? Jeez, you're killing us here. And the United States is going to emerge as the world's biggest economic power. Treaty of Versailles summed up the bad things. All the war guilt is going to be placed primarily on Germany, and they have to pay $33 billion to Britain and France, which in today's money is significantly more. This is a lot of money that they're being asked to pay, and their country's destroyed, so how are they going to pay it? Going to cause a lot of problems for Germany down the road. There are some nice things. It's not bad. It's not good. It's okay. There's going to be some new countries that are created. However, like Wilson wanted, it's not going to be the case. Not always going to be based on national self-determination. You're going to have the League of Nations is created. That is good. Problems with the Treaty of Versailles for the U.S. We actually, even though it's our idea, or, as far as the Wilson's 14 points, we do not sign it and join the League of Nations. There's a couple reasons why. You got what are called the irreconcilables. We're worried in particular that we would get tied into like alliances like happened in World War I. We'd get pulled into conflicts we don't really want to be in. They're like, no, we can't do this whatsoever. Reconcilables, not about the treaty at all. League of Nations, it's a nice idea, but you can't actually have it work. And we're just concerned about the other nations as well. We want to be on our own, let's say isolated. Republicans control Congress. Wilson's also a Democrat. That's going to make it hard. Plus, generally speaking, people are like, hey, World War I, that's nasty. Let's say isolationists. Reservationists there, they're okay with the treaty if it's tweaked a little bit. Just don't want to make go to war without Congress having a say. So we got to tweak the treaty there. We don't like the concept of having to go to defend other nations. So if they're willing to change that, you might have some people that would be saying okay. And then Wilson's Democrats there. Most are going to be, hey, this is cool, let's go, let's do the League of Nations things, let's do it. This here is feeling like, why oppose the League of Nations? Feeling all these different countries are pulling us in different directions. Our hands are tied. We can't do what we want. And all these other countries will have a control over us, though. We don't like that. On the flip side, are talking here, why are we back here a little bit later, 20 years later for World War II? You could argue that because it was our idea for the League of Nations and we don't join it. If you guys are familiar with construction, architecture, if you have an arch, the keystone is that centerpiece we're using to lay on. Because we're not involved, we can't actually hold this thing together and make it run efficiently. So there it is. There's World War I. It's going to eventually lead to World War II, which we'll get into later on this year. If you guys have questions, email me or see me in class.